Welcome to another episode of the Financially Independent SLP. This episode, I just want to share the steps that brought about my financial awareness. I would say I was not financially literate or financially aware when I first joined the profession. I just was excited to get that first position. I was super excited. I said, "Ooh, clinical fellowship, found one." Had my supervisor. Everything was all deliciously gravy. I was just super excited. It wasn't until I had a cohort that said, "Hey, let's do a pay circle," that I realized, okay, there's something to being able to be financially aware and being able to demonstrate value in order to increase the SLP trajectory of a salary and hourly pay and things of that nature. No one taught me in graduate school and undergraduate and in the home setting, because some families, they discuss money, but no one taught me and sat me down and said, "Hey, when it comes to finances, you can be the narrator of your financial story. It's not just being given or take what's handed to you. You can narrate what you want by demonstrating your value. And in order to demonstrate your value, you have to actually understand that you have value." I had a colleague that I had recommended to the company, and she was making so much more than me, and I had no idea. One day she came to me and she said, "Look, I just want to get an idea of what we're being paid within this district." At that time, we had all worked for a school system, the SLPs that I had known at that time. So I had sat down with her and she had this pay circle. She gathered a bunch of SLPs around. We all worked for the exact same district, and we had a varying range of years of experience, ranging from 1 year of experience to 15 years of experience. When I started my clinical fellowship, I was offered $28 an hour. At the time, I thought that was great, that I wasn't making anything before that. I was a student. I was at $28 an hour. When I went from clinical fellow to getting my C's, I said, "Hey, I want a raise." They offered me a $1 raise, and I went from $28 an hour to $29 an hour. So by the time I had negotiated that raise and I had referred my friend to the company, and I had gotten I think it was either a $100 or a $500. It was very minimal, but it was like a $100 referral fee or something like that for referring her to the company. We sat down, we had this pay circle that she came up with, and everyone had to write down. She made up this little form, and the form said, "How many years of experience do you have? What settings have you worked in? Do you have a part-time job in addition to this full-time job? Or how many hours do you work? Are you full-time? Are you part-time? Are you salary? Are you hourly?" She had all these different things that she had written down in the forms. So we wrote it down, our answers. Nobody had their names on there, so everybody can be as green and as honest as possible. And we switched it around at the table and we looked around. I was completely embarrassed because even though there were no names on the table, I knew what my handwriting was. I had the lowest rate of everybody there, and there were people sitting at the table that had far less experience than me. I had already had 2 to 3 years of experience, and my colleague, I knew her handwriting. She was still in her CF, and she was making $36 an hour while I was making $29 having my C's. And I felt like, what did I do wrong here? So out of all the SLPs that were at that table, when we were looking at the different trajectory, we saw, again, a range of 1 to 15 years experience, and the average hourly rates ranged from $31 an hour to $42 an hour. And again, this was specific to the school setting. There were some SLPs that were at the table who also worked per diem, so they were getting, 45, 50, that kind of range for hourly for their per diem rate. And me, myself, I had initially started doing some per diem as well, so I was making 45 hourly per diem, working PRN of roughly 5 to 10 hours a week at an assisted living, in addition to the school system that I was working at for the 28, after the C's, now 29 an hour. And again, I had no idea. And I told my colleague, I said, "Look, so I noticed you were making 36. She was like, "Yeah, that was way too low." And she was trying to negotiate hers up to 39. And I said, "How did you decide your hourly rate?" Because she said when she first started with the company, same as mine, through the district that she had looked up through the Labor Bureau of Statistics. I believe that's what it's called, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. She had looked up online what was the average rate for an SLP for a target amount of years experience for that area. So she was very specific in what she looked at. And when they came at her with a number, which was very similar to mine, they told her like 28, 29 hourly. And she said, "Look, this is what I'm expecting to make. This was my ideal number. Because this is the average I noticed that SLPs for my year of experience is making in that area." She taught me that I can come back, I can gather information, explain my value, and get a monetary reward. That's how that kind of started for me in that journey of, oh, okay, I can negotiate and I don't have to just take what they give me, just like how we're supposed to have autonomy when it comes to being practicing clinicians. Well, we can have autonomy with what we fight for when it comes to the rate and the hourly rate and the hourly pay. We don't do enough fighting, in my opinion, for what we deserve. And it's like, well, part of that is up to us, making sure that we push for our value. Not to say that there aren't, okay, I'm rambling. When facilities know that they're hiring value, they're going to get monetarily rewarded as well. So I began to look at my value. What is my value? How do I justify why I want more or why I deserve more pay? And it wasn't just about me collecting different certifications, because I did begin to get more, but it's also, what are my clients saying? What are colleagues saying? So I'll give examples from different settings, because I did cover different settings as a contract SLP, as well as I did do a couple of direct public school districts, as well as a direct assisted living facility. So I have experience from different sides. So when I worked in the school system, I remember that I had collaborated with different teachers. One teacher in particular, I'll call her Mrs. S. She was the 5th grade teacher. She was extremely stern. She never liked speech therapy. It all changed when it came to this little boy. I'll call him Aaron. That is not his real name. Aaron was extremely shy about his lateral lisp and distorted vocalic R sounds. He barely spoke. He didn't speak up in class. He had this great personality that he never showed anyone. He was just extremely shy about his articulation errors, and he just wouldn't participate. And it really affected his socialization in the classroom, and Miss S was extremely worried about him. By the end of the school year, though, with him working with me, he had enough confidence to even ask his crush to walk her to the water fountain, and that's a big deal for a 10-year-old who has a speech impediment. And his own mother decided to send his twin siblings to the same school because of his experiences with me. I was able to turn Miss S into an SLP supporter. So just examples like that were what I started to bring up, and I started to talk about how other people were esteeming my contribution to wherever I worked, to highlight my value, and how by rewarding me, they're rewarding the community, because people were coming to the facility and giving the facility money, or giving the school system bodies and therefore money, through Medicaid reimbursement and things of that nature. I'm referring to the Title I school that I was in for that particular Aaron, young man. I started to decide to talk to, the people who were responsible for payroll and paycheck and things of that nature. Like, hey, this is my value. I'm bringing awareness to your particular place. I'm bringing awareness to your company. I'm putting a great taste in people's mouths related to this, and I would like to continue to do that. This is why, and this is the value I see in your company, and this is the value I see that I'm bringing to this company, and I'd like to continue to stay here and do that. That's when I started projecting my ideal number, and I went up in increments, $3 to $5 at a time. I waited maybe 2 or 3 years before I asked for the next increase. I didn't try to stick it every year, because I feel like you want to show some sense of loyalty and value to the company, and it takes some time to build that. So I would wait every 3 years or so before I would ask for the next thing. I would say I averaged 2.5 years before I asked for the next increase. Then I switched to the medical setting that had a natural increase within itself. I asked for $5 more than what I made in the school setting. So I jumped from $29 hourly to, I want to say I jumped higher than that. I made more than $33 an hour on my first, so I went from $29 hourly to about $35 hourly for my first jump to the medical setting. And that's the full-time hours, because I was still doing $45 an hour for the per diem. I gave another example of my value when it was time for me to say, hey, I want more. I had a patient who had liked me for the cognitive communication therapy that I was giving them. Before I came on board, whoever they had before, they did not like that person. I have no idea why. It could just have been the approach, because this particular patient was in the Navy, and they had a very succinct way of responding to people depending on how they were approached. Me being married to a military personnel, I understood how to approach military personnel. So therefore they really liked me, and they actually, after they got discharged, were ranting and raving about speech pathology. They came back to volunteer with the facility, actually ended up working as a volunteer for the activities department, which saved us, that particular nursing facility, a lot of time and money, because the activities director really needed an assistant. They didn't want, I can't say they didn't want, but they didn't have to spend the funds to hire an activities assistant after being able to acquire this former patient of mine as a dedicated volunteer who was coming in 3 times a week for 8 full hours. She even began to recruit her friends with short-term hip replacements and other things that they needed for short-term rehab to that particular facility. And she referred to me as the girl who asked questions. She kept saying, that girl who asked questions, she makes you still feel like a human being, even though you're sick. So with her ranting and raving, she was bringing more money to the facility. And I was able to highlight that, like, hey, I'm a likable person. I'm seeing progress with these patients. And they're also, they also feel like they're getting something of value. So, let's value me. Again, know the number that you're worth. You may answer during that time of review or annual review or anything of that nature. You say, hey, look, my ideal number per hour or per year is this because this is what the patients are saying about me. This is what colleagues are saying about me. This is what the community feels about me. This is how our company is being perceived since I've been here. You can also say, look, the value I see in this company or this building or this facility or this whatever you want to say, you could say the value I see in this place is this, and my value is matched because of this. That's the language that I've used. You can also leverage. One time I was getting a lot of pushback and I began to leverage with the recruiting manager, with payroll. And I said, look, I just want to let you know that I'm considering multiple offers at the moment. And I'm really hoping to connect with this offer to stay here at my ideal number of X. Or you can also say, hey, I did some research on, and you can use any arbitrary place. I personally use payscale.com, but I could say I did some research on payscale.com, and the market is currently offering this as an average for my field for X amount of, years experience. And I'm asking for the average for my market nationally, or you could say I'm asking for the average for my market regionally or statewide, however you want to line that up. And you can say, I'm asking for the average for X amount of dollars, or if you want to go a little bit above, you can say, look, I'm only asking for X amount of dollars above the average, which is a fair margin. Over the past years, I've done blah, 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 blah accomplishments. And here's how I highlight my value for the pay. I'd like my pay to reflect my additional accomplishments that I've had since I started X amount ago. One facility that I went from, I would want to say about this time, about 3 or 4 years had passed. So I stopped being at the 35 hourly mark and I pushed it all the way up to $41 an hour. And I used the cost. I started asking different therapists who had more experience than me, hey, how much do thick and liquids cost these facilities per year? At that time, there was a study out that was discussing the average range of, thick and liquids were costing the facilities $6,000 to $8,000 per person per year. So I literally tried to do a guesstimation of the math. And I said, look, I have this many people on my caseload who have successfully returned to thin liquids for the past year. If I translated that to funds, this study is saying that, this thick and liquids can cost facilities up to X amount of dollars. And I've saved you $50,000 per year for the past 5 years. I just had this number that I had figured out based on the numbers that were given to me in that particular study at that time. And I wish I remembered the study now. I don't. But my and I told them my newly requested hourly pay is less than 5% of what I've saved you. So I made this whole mathematical thing because I felt like, okay, people understand numbers, they understand objective percentages. So let me just talk to them in that aspect. So I was able to go from 36 an hour to $41 an hour. I used that same tactic roughly 6 months later, and I don't know why I did it in that short amount of time, but I went from $41 to $43 an hour. I had another success story, so I was able to do that at that time. After some more years passed, and I was no longer satisfied with the $43 an hour full time, and I had pushed my per diem. I had signed up for a new per diem company, and I wanted a rate of $50 an hour. I said, look, I'm not taking less than $50 an hour. And they granted me that. So I had moved up to $50 an hour for per diem instead of $45 an hour. And I didn't do per diem very often. I did it sporadically. It was like maybe 6 hours a month, if that. I just did it enough to stay on the roster, just to have some extra money coming in. But full time, I had pushed that from 41, 43, 45. I had moved it up to $45 an hour by that time. So I was getting more adventurous because I was running into therapists who, again, were making more than me. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm still not doing this right. So it got to the point where I had been working for one company for, I want to say 7 to 8 years. And I had emailed the CEO himself. I found him on LinkedIn. I requested a connect. I sent him this whole message about how I loved the company, how I was dedicated to the company. And I highlighted how few vacations I was taking, the little bit that I was asking for in terms of compensation, and how it would be such a shame for me to leave the company for just requesting $6 to $8 more hourly. I kept justifying my worth and collected recommendations from cohorts on my LinkedIn profile, and I included my LinkedIn profile in my message to the CEO. I had no idea what I was thinking even sending him this, but I sent it. And he never responded to my email. He never connected with me on LinkedIn. But a part of me always felt like there was something there, because the very next day that I had sent him that message, I got an email from my personal hiring recruiter who confirmed that I was approved for a raise. Like I had jumped from $41 an hour to $47 an hour. Even though I initially asked for $49, I was just happy that I was able to push back and get something that was much higher than what they were going to have at that time. So I went from 41 to 43 to 47. I probably said that wrong. I jumped from 45 to 47, and I was happy for that, even though I asked for 49. And I eventually got to 48 an hour, and I was so excited about that, because I was like, wow, like I can actually get something from a full-time position that I fought for and that I pushed. So definitely know your value. Know what that number means to you. Know what that ideal number means to you. Like, what is the number that you refuse to go below per hour with what you're asking for? And then, because you can justify that, you can push to get that. So I just wanted to kind of share how I kind of raised up to that point. And that's pretty much the strategy that I use. I always go to what is the national average for this state, this region, this area, nationally, regionally, locally, whatever it is. What is the average for that area? And depending on what I want, I either try and go for a few dollars above the average, or I try to stick to the average. But either way, I refuse to work below the average of a target area. And I always highlight that, because I like to have that baseline. I say, look, this is the average for this area, and I'm not taking lower than that. Or this is the average for this area, and I'm asking for a fair margin by just asking for $3 more, or just asking for $5 more, based on my experience and the certifications that I've acquired. I did acquire some additional, certifications along the way, in addition to just my C's. I was very excited about the journey of being able to progress all the way up, from starting at 29 hourly to here we are years later, and I'm averaging between 55 to 70 hourly in a setting, and I'm only working part-time hours because I want to be able to climb all the way up to the 45 hourly, to the 48 hourly, to the 49 hourly. And then now with per diem, it's like 60 hourly now. So I'm not taking, I'll be okay with 50 to 55, but that's what I push for, and that's what I ask for, and that is what I get. So know your value. You're valuable. So go out there and negotiate. Welcome to another